Many new game developers have a story they want to tell, an astounding plot, amazing characters, and loads of humor that will skyrocket their game into the best-selling list. And while every genre of game lends itself to a unique storytelling experiences, the role-playing game, or RPG for short, is one of the best-known and most versatile methods of creating a great story in a game. Many RPG games have left huge impacts on their respective audiences. Whether it's the awesome characters of Final Fantasy you still know the names of, or the wacky characters in Undertale or Athenian Rhapsody, RPG games have a unique potential for storytelling. Additionally, RPGs are known for their incredible success stories. Undertale, for example, was made by a single person and reached a level of popularity unmatched by some of the most successful AAA titles. And so it comes as little surprise that many new developers gravitate towards this genre when first making a game. However, few realize exactly how difficult it is to make one of these games. Generally, when I speak to new developers, they want to create their dream RPG as quickly as possible while learning as little as possible about game development. While it would be quite cool to make an RPG, they are undoubtedly one of the most difficult games you could possibly make. There are two big reasons for this. The first is complexity. If you're making a standard turn-based RPG game with no minigames or puzzles, then you will need to make at least 2 games at the same time. One for the world that the player explores, and one for the actual combat system. RPG games have a lot of moving parts that need to work together well for a fun experience. If the UI feels clunky to work with, or if the battles are frustrating, or if the story isn't engaging, few players will stick around until the end credits. The second complication with RPG games is content. RPG games are very content-oriented games. Now I can hear what you're saying, dear viewer. Gatsby, what is a content-oriented game? Great question! You see, many games survive off of their mechanics. They make mechanics that are really fun, gameplay loops that are short and really interesting, and essentially a game thrives off its mechanics alone and not so much on what's inside the game. For example, let's look at a game like Balatro. The mechanics are light, they make sense, and if you change around the win conditions every now and again and add a randomized shop, then the game will always feel fun and fresh to play. There aren't worlds, there aren't levels, there aren't a huge amount of animations and cutscenes and story and text and sounds and all this different kind of stuff. The content of the game is mostly going to stay the same. Yes, I know that each Joker does something different, but that's going to be very different than the same way that an enemy in Undertale is going to be doing something different. You might come across the same cards, you might come across different cards, but either case, the game will still be fun and still be interesting. The game is cleverly designed that it gets away with having a little amount of things do a lot. Super Mario, however, is a very content-oriented game. Ever notice how they introduce a new mechanic with each stage? Without a new gimmick per level, Mario would start to feel bland and lifeless. It's the new content introduced regularly that makes the game fun. I'm willing to bet that once you beat a level in Mario, you probably didn't go back after you completed the game and play that same level again because you liked it so much. There's nothing wrong with making a content-oriented game, but you do have to be cognizant. Making a content-oriented game means that you will have to do more work with art, with sounds, and with gameplay to make the game feel fun, fresh, and original. In summary, a content-oriented game thrives off of introducing the player to new situations, to new places, to new things, promising the player that every time they turn the corner, they're going to encounter something new. Whereas, in contrast, a non-content oriented game is a game that can get away with doing more with less. It's a game where the player won't feel bad if they have to replay a section or the same enemies keep on reappearing. It's a type of game where the developer has to do less work to create a fun gameplay experience. So imagine we take a game that the player can move around in any direction and explore and discover new things, and areas with their unique art and music, and the battle system is a complete turn-based minigame thing, and all the enemies are all unique and do different things, and there's a story with fights you can possibly miss because your choices change the plot itself. Well, not only do you get an insane content-oriented game with tons of complexity, but you also get an RPG. This is a big part of the reason why RPGs take so long to develop. Undertale, the indie success story that made loads of money, took about 32 months to develop with a solo developer. Athenian Rhapsody, which came before and inspired Undertale, that's true by the way, don't fact check it, took around about 4 years with a solo developer. An RPG shines when care is taken to perfect the small details and charms to create a unique and engaging experience. So, that being said, let's learn a bit more about these games by trying to make one in just 24 hours. The rules for this project are similar to the rules for the FNAF-like game I made in my last video. I need to make the game within 24 hours according to the Gamemaker built-in timer under the main tab. This timer only ticks upward when I'm inside the project in Gamemaker Studio, so I can do things like eat, sleep, and question my life decisions without it affecting my timer. Unlike the FNAF-like, however, I'm going to do the art entirely within the time limit inside Gamemaker. I just wanted to mimic the way a game like this would be designed in the real world as closely as possible, so that's what I did. With all those rules out of the way, let me explain how this video is going to go. I'm trying to understand what makes a video fun to watch, so bear with me. Any critiques I'd love to hear in the comments section. First, I'm going to explain some of the technical aspects of Gamemaker and the tricks I use to make the mechanics shown in-game. I don't want this video to be the same as a Gamemaker tutorial, so I won't really go over the code itself, mostly just the theory and some tricks I use to do it. After that, I'll go over game design decisions, stuff that doesn't rely on any game engine in particular, and just what mechanics I used and why I chose them. Finally, I'll talk about what went well with the project and what didn't, and go over it post-mortem. So let's get to it. Alright, so like I said before, an RPG game with a turn-based battle system is basically just two games at the same time. I'll start with the battle system first, because I think it'll be more complex, and then worry about the overworld part. To set this up right, we need to consider all the parts. We want the overworld to not be loaded when a battle is running, and the battle to not be loaded when the overworld is running. The easiest way to do that is to make a few separate rooms for the overworld and the battle system, and then flip between them as necessary. So I started by making an empty room to represent the overworld, and an empty room with a battle manager object in it to represent the battle room. I used the RPG template that is provided by Gamemaker as part of their RPG tutorial, so that I could borrow some of the sprites they used. I didn't actually check to see how they do a turn-based battler in Gamemaker official tutorial, but this is what makes sense to me. I would highly recommend looking over that tutorial if you're a beginner and want to learn how to make an overworld or a turn-based battle RPG system. Now we will want some objects to never get unloaded so that we can transfer data around and stuff. The best way to do this is with persistent objects. We'll make some persistent objects to track player position and player inventory, all that stuff. To make sure that we don't create more persistent objects every time the room is loaded, we won't put these objects in the overworld or the battle rooms. Instead, we'll create a new room that we enter once that creates the persistent objects and that we then never ever return to. Basically, when you click run, the game will start in this persistent room, go straight to the overworld room, and stay there or in the battle room until the game is over. Now we'll be able to have persistent objects to carry our data and have room loading and unloading working right. For the battle system, I decided to put my own unique spin on the Undertale system, where you could go right or left and it'd wrap you around. I made the player object a child of a loopable parent, and then applied code to the loopable parent. Child parenting is really nice because if you want something like wrapping to work for a bunch of different objects, like the player and the bullets that I'm going to add later, you don't need to go in and code that behavior separately. You can apply it to all of them at once. I also drew every loopable child 3 times and then used a surface to make things appear partly inside the box. That way it looks better and stays contained. The work was going really well up until, for no reason, the power shut off in my mansion. When it came back on, Gamemaker refused to open my project. Basically, if the save gets corrupted, Gamemaker won't recognize your project and it may lose your project forever. My save got corrupted when the power went off. Fortunately, I spoke with some people on the Gamemaker Discord server and found the YYP fixer, which sometimes is able to fix projects like this. And thank heavens, it was able to fix mine. I was able to get away lucky this time, but this is why you should generally store saves of your game using something like GitHub. I made a GitHub repository for this project and soldiered on. Using arrays and structs, I made fighting data that could be loaded into the battle via a persistent object. I then made some ways to resolve the battle and moved on to the overworld. I used a tutorial by Sarah Spalding to set up my save load system. However, I implemented it poorly and I'm not 100% sure it works properly. I was pretty disappointed by the free tiles that came with the Gamemaker RPG tutorial free assets, so I drew in some of my own. I used Pixelated Pope's camera tutorial to make the camera and did some basic RPG movement with Gamemaker's new move and collide function. Now the text box was a little bit complicated. I used Mimpy's text box tutorial to make something simple. However, I did modify some things. Mimpy's text box is very versatile, and while it maybe can't do all the things that Undertale's text box can, it's still really good at what it does, and I could modify it easily. However, if you're looking for a text box in Gamemaker, there's maybe a better option. The Chatterbox Textbox by Juju Adams is really nice, and all you have to do is download it and apply it to your project. I don't use Chatterbox because I've never touched it and I don't know how it works, but it's supposedly really good. It comes with everything you want and more without needing to work too hard for it. But if you download Chatterbox or follow Mimpy's excellent tutorial, we now have a Textbox. Now let's go over some design decisions. I decided to make the game basically an Undertale knockoff or an Undertale fan game because I think the battle system is fun, and also so many people in the Gamemaker Discord server start off making games like this. Like in the help channels and stuff, I see countless projects, and in the Gamemaker showcase of Undertale fan games and things. Like hundreds, maybe thousands. Honestly, I couldn't name a single one that was actually released though. Anyway, I like to do my own thing, so I changed up how combat is done in my version. Basically, Undertale, you can choose to attack, which gives you a short little minigame, or you can choose to spare, which mostly involves a little bit of text and maybe some other things. This system is pretty fun, it handles missing better than other RPG combat systems, and its spare system adds in a bit of that classic Toby Fox humor. However, I am not Toby Fox and I cannot match his level of humor, so we will need to think of something else. In Undertale, each enemy is unique not only in combat but also in how you spare them. If I was able to mimic that, it would take up a lot of time. So instead, I made a system that was a bit less complex. You have 3 options: attacking, reasoning, and complementing, that are the same for every enemy you encounter. Unlike in Undertale, the enemy has their own position inside the game window. If you choose to attack, you'll need to shoot the enemy. If you choose to reason, you'll need to keep near the enemy. If you choose to complement the enemy, you'll need to catch a few green bullets. Hurting the enemy removes health from their health bar, and complementing and reasoning fills up a spare bar. I use this system because it's very simple and very scalable. This is a system I can apply to all enemies equally, but because each enemy is going to be attacking and moving differently, each enemy is still going to feel different no matter what choice you pick to neutralize them. I don't need to create much additional content to support this system. Also, I feel like while the spare system is fun and interesting in Undertale, it does kind of undercut some of the gameplay, which means that sometimes fighting becomes less of an interesting part of the gameplay and becomes more of an annoyance in between pushing spare buttons. With this system, everything is tuned into the gameplay. Now, most RPGs include something to let your character grow stronger over time. We all know about leveling systems. You kill something, you get XP, you level up, you grow stronger, etc. This mechanic is so popular that it has been appearing in games that aren't even RPGs. I, of course, decided not to include this system for a few specific reasons. The first is trying to decrease the amount of content I would need to make. Leveling systems don't make a lot of sense to me. Like, you earn XP that's like different for each enemy, but also is different based on your level. And also, like, when you level up, it changes different stats differently. I don't really understand it. It doesn't make much sense to me or to the player, and it seemed to be a pain to figure out in my project. So, to encourage exploration, I tried a different approach. The player's stats are instead edited by equipable medallions you can find by talking to people and exploring. This not only allows the player to fine-tune their character better to what they want, but also encourages the player to explore more. I didn't want to go to the trouble of making inventory and loads of consumable items in the game, and I thought this medallion system would provide something a lot more interesting. Finally, story-wise, I tried to make something that was basically an inversion of the story of Undertale. You, a monster, fall down into a subterranean world that is populated by humans who lost a war with monsters a long time ago and were imprisoned. Now, far more important than the story itself, many of the best RPGs hinged on their great character design. And I've been thinking for a while about like maybe making a full video about why some characters succeed and why some characters don't succeed in a game. But to simplify it down to its very base roots, basically a good character was one that the player understands and provides something for the player. Essentially, a good character is one that the player can understand their motives, offers something to the player, and helps push the story along. In Undertale, we can see this. Like a character like Sans, he's very funny, he's very interesting, and so as soon as the player sees him, the player knows, oh, this is a fun and funny character, and I want to see more of this character going on. Somebody like the King in Undertale is also a really good character, because while they're not exactly funny, they're a more serious character. The player doesn't exactly understand why the King does what he does, and also the final confrontation with the King is built up a lot, so the character of the King builds up a lot of anticipation and creates a lot of excitement in the player. So I worked very hard on this game. I split it across basically like 2 weeks essentially, only logging into Gamemaker and working for like maybe 2 or 3 hours here and there. And I very nearly got to 24 hours. I ended up like very close, like 23 hours or so, which at that point I call an end. So having finished with the project, I want to say a few things. First off, I was not able to make a full game. I failed to make an RPG in 24 hours. While I was able to be speedy with the system design, like I was able to get the Textbox working pretty well, I was able to get the combat system working pretty well. I basically was only able to make like the minimum viable product, the minimum of what you could possibly make to launch and for the player to actually like have fun and play through it. That means that there isn't a whole lot of content in the game. A lot of the things I had planned were actually had to be scrapped just because designing the systems for the RPG took so long that I wasn't able to sit down and create a lot of content. That being said, I did use some tricks to try to create the content faster. So for example, here I basically created a battle object that would start a battle, and then I would run into that, test everything, debug everything, make sure that the battle worked. And that way I could just go really, really fast. I wouldn't have to like walk through the entire game to like bump into other battle sequences. And then after that was done, I put those battle sequences somewhere appropriate in the overworld, and I added in some text, I added some story, I added in the only character that my game has, which is Bart the Bard. I tried to have Bart kind of give a little bit of exposition, create a little drama, give things to the player, really kind of show up as this kind of like mysterious yet ultimately helpful guy who the player could create friendship with and could invest themselves with. Other story important characters I had, such as like the king and queen, I wasn't actually able to get into the game in time. While I have sprites for them, their battle isn't like set up or anything. Second off, the save system is really, really good. Sarah Spalding did a great job with her tutorial, but I implemented it poorly and I don't think it 100% works. I think it has a lot of bugs. So if I were to go back and try to make a more finished product of this game, I would need to refine the save system quite a bit. The battle system ended up feeling a lot more chaotic than Undertale's. Like there's a lot going on because each of the enemies has their own position inside the game box, and each of those enemies are also like shooting at the same time without like lessening their attacks because there's other enemies beside them. Also, if the player starts shooting as well, like it just gets even more chaotic. There's more bullets on screen. I tried to keep the contrast for the player's bullets very, very low so that they kind of fade into the background so that you didn't really have to worry about them. But that, like with the resolution system, like the complement system is like very like strange. Like it really, really changes up the gameplay. Like you have to sometimes dodge the bullets, but also like catch different ones. The other resolution system is also like really strange. Like you have to get close to the enemy, but that makes you like more susceptible to bullets and stuff like that. I thought it would be interesting, and it kind of is, but I also feel like it's like very, very chaotic and kind of difficult to play with. So like the combat in the end kind of felt like, I don't think that the gameplay felt great there. And also, most importantly, I wasn't able to make enough content for it to feel like a really great RPG game within the time that I allotted myself. So you may have watched this video and felt a little bit discouraged about making your own RPG game. That's exactly what I was going for. No, I'm just kidding. I will say, and if you ask a lot of people in the Gamemaker Studio Discord server, I don't recommend making an RPG game for your first project. It is very, very complex, and it relies heavily on the systems that you set up in the beginning. And if the systems aren't set up well, it's going to be a pain for the entire rest of the game. However, I say this, and looking back at some of the RPG games that I've seen made in Gamemaker Studio, there's actually a precedent for an RPG game being like the first game that you actually try to make. Some of you may have heard that Toby Fox's programming is really, really poor. And it is true. This seems to suggest that Toby Fox wasn't much of a programmer. That Undertale was possibly one of the first games or one of his first experiments into using Gamemaker Studio. And so curious about this, I went to somebody who also made an RPG game in Gamemaker Studio and tried to learn more information about it from him. And this is premium content right here. I talked with the developer of Athenian Rhapsody. His name is Nico. And this is premium content that you won't get anywhere else. I had to go to Nico. I had to go to his house. He lived on top of a mountain. I had to defeat him in a Pokemon battle just for me to glean this information for you. Just for him to share his wisdom with us mere mortals. It was quite the ordeal. So if you want more premium content like this, please subscribe. It helps a lot. And while I was talking with Nico about Athenian Rhapsody, this like huge sprawling RPG game, which is so much more complex than this little toy I was making right now. Seriously, there's so many minigames. There's so much love put into Athenian Rhapsody, so much detail work and so many different things going on. It's like thousands of different games in one game. Nico actually told me that during the 4 years of development, it was one of the only games that he ever made in Gamemaker Studio. Like it was like maybe his first project in Gamemaker Studio. Now, I could be wrong on that. Of course, there could be like other like little games that never got released or little like experiments and projects like that. But from what I can tell, it seems that these two big, really awesome, really incredible RPGs were the first projects for two separate people. And I found that very, very interesting. While I was talking with Nico about this, I asked him specifically if he would recommend an RPG for the first project for somebody. And his response was really, really insightful. He said, whatever keeps you motivated. The thing is about making games is that sometimes stuff moves slowly. Sometimes it doesn't seem that the game is actually progressing towards an end and you want to quit. You want to give up. You want to feel bad and turn your back on game design forever. Nico was undoubtedly really passionate about what he was creating. You can see it in the game itself. And because of that, even though he might have not had the most experience when he started out, his passion drove him to continue through the difficult times, to learn what he needed to learn, and to become the game developer that Athenian Rhapsody needed to exist. So if you have the same amount of passion, if you have that desire to make something no matter the cost, to stick with it and create something incredible, then go for it. If you want to start with an RPG, that's all right. Your entry into game design will be personal to you and will be something special. I just recommend doing what keeps you motivated, doing what keeps you happy, and doing things that make game development fun for you. I hope that this video shed a little bit more light on how an RPG game is developed. I also hope that this video was entertaining to watch, answered some of your questions, and also helps you think more about games and what goes into making a game. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel and gives me a lot of motivation to keep on putting videos like this out there. I don't know when the next time I'll make another video like this is. These videos kind of take a lot out of me, especially this project in particular. But if you have a suggestion for a game that you'd like to see created in 24 hours, go ahead and post a comment and tell me what you think I should do next. And feel free to let me know how I can improve the video. Oh, and one last thing. You might be expecting me to provide the source files for this project the same way that I did for the FNAF project. I'm afraid that's not going to happen with this one. The reason is very, very simple. First, the game isn't nearly as polished as the FNAF clone game I did a little while back. Second is I've seen so many people in the Gamemaker help channels who just copy and paste code. And I know that if the source files are out there somewhere, then that code is going to come back to bite me in the Gamemaker help channels. Maybe if you want the source and you and I are like really good friends and we know each other by like a first name basis or whatever, then yeah, I could send them over. But for now, I'm gonna keep those source files close to my chest. Thank you so much for watching, old sport, and have a lovely day.